humanitarian questions to order. I should say at the beginning that our Vice Chair, Mr. Link, sends his apologies as he is unable to join us today for family reasons. Colleagues, the agenda for this meeting has been distributed. Can I please invite you to adopt the agenda? Any objections? The agenda is adopted. Thank you. It's a pleasure for me to welcome you to this meeting. Before we begin, I would like to ask anyone speaking from a prepared text to hand that text to the Secretariat in advance. Helping the interpreters in this way will make our meeting more efficient. Thank you. May I remind colleagues that the election of our committee officers for the 29th annual session of the Assembly will take place during the committee's final session, which is likely to take place on Sunday morning. Nominations for candidates for election should be handed in to the table office no later than the start of that meeting tomorrow, 11:30. We are now moving on to the continuation of the debate on our draft resolution. We shall begin by continuing that debate. There are 6 members left on the speakers list who have not yet spoken. I wish to remind that we closed the speakers list yesterday already. You have a time limit for speeches of 3 minutes. Thereafter, in the amendment part, I will ask you to observe a time limit of 1 minute. I now open the floor for debate, and I like to give the floor to Mr. Mirkishvili from Azerbaijan. Next speaker will be Mr. Thorsson from Iceland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like also to thank to Mr. Hajiani for a comprehensive report and the draft resolution also. Mr. Hajiani, you mentioned it very exactly at the report that occupation by military forces in conflict area across the OCC region remains a major cause of human rights abuse. Increasing of the human rights violation, facts are linking directly with the occupation of territories. Without ending of occupation, it will not realistic to protect or to develop human rights of the people. Security and development are 2 main functions of humanity. Non-providing security and absence of development atmosphere will put human rights on background always, despite of all our efforts. While speaking on human rights, I remind that universal human rights shall be exercised in accordance with the constitutional and legal framework of states. No solution is possible which is inconsistent with the international law and constitution of states. Mr. Hajiani, as you mentioned it, one of the conflict in our area, the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, one of the main challenges for the human rights. I just want to remind that Azerbaijan believes that the Azerbaijan and Armenian communities of Nagorno-Karabakh region are capable of living peacefully side by side, again within the internationally recognized borders of Azerbaijan. After the withdrawal of occupant Armenian forces from all the occupied territories, in the environment of peaceful coexistence of the Azerbaijan and Armenian communities of the Nagorno-Karabakh region of Azerbaijan, just and durable peace, sustainable regional stability, and security will prevail. At the final, I want to react to number 16 paragraph in the resolution regarding the genocide. I just want to remind that genocide is the legal words, is not political tools, and we are against to use such legal words in the OCC documents just to use or to give some chance to another states to use like political tools or political pressure to another states. That's why I just want to remind my minds that not to use in the future the legal words on the political documents, like in resolution or in the reports. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, the floor goes to Mr. Thorsen from Iceland, while Ms. Mattison from Canada is preparing. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Human rights are not something you earn gradually with good behavior or by not irritating powerful people. We are all born with those rights, and it is one of the main roles of politicians to make sure that those rights are reflected in laws and legislations. One of those basic human rights is the right to define yourself according to your identity without being persecuted, humiliated, or harassed. Last month, the Icelandic Parliament passed the Gender Autonomy Act, which is a huge step forward in terms of respecting the human rights of trans and intersex people in Iceland. The bill confirms the right of the individual to change their gender in the official registry to reflect their own experience and without having to meet diagnostic requirements or receive medical treatment. The Act also ensures that children under the age of 18 can change their registered gender and name in the National Registry with the consent of their parents. If parents' consent is not available, the decision is put before a committee of experts. The bill thus aims to respect and strengthen the self-determination of each individual, where their own understanding of gender identity is the basic for decision-making regarding their public gender registration. The Act is also intended to safeguard the individual's right to bodily autonomy. The LGBTI community in Iceland has called this bill very important and a huge step forward. However, it has been criticized that intersex children have not received protection against what has been called unnecessary and irreversible medical interventions. Instead, a working group will be appointed to ensure that legal status of children born with atypical sex characteristics. I am very proud of this important step that the Icelandic authorities have taken, and I hope this law can be replicated in more OSCE countries. Thank you.
Thank you. Now the floor goes to Ms. Mattison from Canada, while Mr. Dubbs, United Kingdom, is getting ready. Canada, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to Mr. Hajani for his report and the depth of his analysis. I think it's crucial that we use this opportunity to protect and secure all human rights. It's the obligation of every one of us to secure the right of the security of person. The world has committed itself to the promise that nations will ensure that no human being is subjected to violence, poverty, homophobia, sexism, and punitive imprisonment. I believe we need to turn our attention to what is happening to women, girls, and LGBTQ2S individuals. For quite some time, we've seen well-funded and terrifying efforts to undermine the human rights of women, girls, and the LGBTQ2S community. This is no less than a return to the war on women and gays. There are those in this world willing to use their wealth, power, and privilege to turn back the clock on the limited rights women have secured in regard to their right to choose, secure their reproductive rights, and security of person. We're witnessing a move by anti-choice, anti-gay organizations, legislators, churches, and corporations to propose, support, and enact laws that limit a woman's right to choose whether or not to continue a pregnancy. These anti-choice, anti-gay entities have funding, lawyers, and legislators to carry out their campaign. The influence of this group is present in subnational governments in the US, cities in Europe, and is rapidly spreading to South America and the Caribbean. No country is immune. The laws that are promoted make it illegal for a woman to seek an abortion beyond 6 weeks if there is described fetal heartbeat. In reality, most women are not even aware of a pregnancy at 6 weeks, and what is described as a heartbeat is actually pulsing tissues that haven't yet formed the chambers of a heart. In most cases, these laws permit no exemption for victims of rape or incest, and women can and have been sent to prison for procuring an abortion, and the doctors that help them in prison for providing the procedure. Women's rights and lives are increasingly being put at risk for ideological reasons. The WHO estimates that each year there are 25 million unsafe abortions, 7 million women are hospitalized as a result of complications, and 500 women per 100,000 of these unsafe procedures die. Almost every death and disability caused by unsafe abortion is preventable. This is a public health crisis. The more restrictive the law, the higher the death rate, the greater the disability. If we truly believe in human rights, we must be prepared to guarantee a woman's right to choose. Support for the autonomy of women to choose is a signal to the patriarchal that women are absolutely entitled to control their fertility so that each and every one of us can participate in our country's social and political reality. Thank you. Miigwech.
Thank you. The floor now goes to Mr. Dubs, United Kingdom, and Ms. Henriksen from Norway is getting ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I give my full support to the last speaker? And I think we should pay a tribute to Ireland for the very successful referendum they had on giving women choice. It still leaves Northern Ireland out on a limb, but we're working on that one. I'd like to cover 3 specific issues. Firstly, migrants, secondly, the death penalty, and thirdly, torture. As regards migrants, I do believe that we all, particularly those of us in Europe, need to share responsibility. We cannot allow the whole responsibility to rest with the Greeks or indeed with the Italians. I think we have to step up to the mark and share responsibility. Secondly, we have to protect the rights of migrants. When they reach our countries, we have to make sure they have the right to work, that migrants have the full rights that they should be entitled to, not to have a lesser position for too many years while their status is being determined. And thirdly, we should be aware of the very difficult situation in Libya, where people who've crossed the Sahara are, in some cases, being held virtually captive in prison camps, in terrible danger, and then when the people traffickers are tired of them, they put them in boats off the shore of Libya, and when they're outside Libyan territorial waters, they then phone up and say this boat is liable to sink. It is very, very dangerous, and we've seen too many people drowning in the Mediterranean. We've got to do something about that. We can't just step aside and say, oh, it's nothing to do with us. It is to do with us. It is our responsibility. Next, as regards the death penalty, I welcome the fact that slowly, state by state, the United States is moving against the death penalty, but there's still a long way to go. And that simply leaves the United States and Belarus as 2 countries that practice death penalty within the OSCE area. Well, I was asked about a year ago to go to China to talk about the death penalty there. And I have to say, in a light-hearted mood, I said to them, why don't they abolish the death penalty in China? They'd beat the United States to it, but it didn't seem to have any effect on them. Thirdly, as regards torture, we have to be careful that the threat of terrorism cannot in any circumstances justify the use of torture or justify the use of information that has been obtained by torture, even if the people who pass on the information did not necessarily commit the torture themselves. If we use information obtained by torture, we're conniving at torture and we're undermining the whole principle of human rights. That is surely unacceptable to us. Torture is the most abominable thing to do to a fellow human being. We must be resolute against it. Thank you.
Thank you. The floor now goes to Ms. Henriksen from Norway et se prépare Madame Mauborgne de France.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Hadjiani, for a thorough and good report. And dear colleagues, the report addresses many important issues, amongst them, once again, suppression of women, youth, children, and discrimination against minorities. And it is frightening to see the growing political trends, which also this report reflects, towards less equality policy in many OSCE countries. We can observe that hatred, suppression, and discrimination of Jews and Roma are closely linked to the same against other minorities, like LGBTI people and women. It is equality that is at stake, one of the most fundamental human rights. Peace, security, economic development, and prosperity are linked to equality for all people. I noted that Mrs. Doris Barnett, in her speech in the plenary session, addressed the need for organizational changes within the OSCE to strengthen the inclusion of youth in our organization, and I fully support her initiative. They are the future. Furthermore, we have to ensure full gender balance in our own organization. Diversity is an advantage and necessary if we want to achieve our goals and visions. And for our practical political work in all our efforts, also internal positions in the organization. To achieve our goals, we need tools, and I would like to pay gratitude to Ms. Hedy Fry for her work, which has given us a practical tool to survey the development on gender issues. I will close with a quote after my recollection from Mr. Stephen Hoyer from US, from his speech at the opening plenary session. Peace does not depend on democracy. It depends on us making it. So it depends on us. We have the knowledge, and yes, we have to improve some tools. We know which challenges we face. So first and foremost, we have to act. And Mr. Hadiani, your report underlines the role of the parliaments. All of us is committed to the OSCE's visions and goals. It all depends on us. We have to act better and in the right way to ensure more equality, democracy, and peace. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Before I give the floor to Madame Mauborgne de France, I would just invite those who will speak on the First Amendments to get ready. Thank you. Je passe la parole à Madame Mauborgne.
Merci Madame la Présidente. Je regrette l'absence de Monsieur Cohen, notre collègue des États-Unis, qui a interpellé hier la France à propos de l'augmentation des actes antisémites dans notre pays. D'abord, je voulais dire que je partage son indignation sur l'augmentation des actes antisémites. On le constate ailleurs en Europe, on le constate, on le regrette, on le condamne et on le combat dans le cadre de l'état de droit. La France combat ces exactions en se dotant de nouveaux moyens juridiques sur les fake news, sur les incitations à la haine sur Internet, sur la viralité des publications sur les réseaux sociaux, sur la lutte contre la radicalisation religieuse. Nous avons besoin de tout le poids de la diplomatie parlementaire, notamment pour augmenter la pression sur les GAFA, sur Facebook, sur Twitter, pour qu'ils nous aident à réguler toutes les paroles qui incitent à la haine. Merci Madame la Présidente.
Merci beaucoup. That concludes our debate on the draft resolution. We may now move to consider the 30 amendments submitted to this draft resolution. I would like to draw your attention to the fact that the correct version is entitled AS, capital letters, 19 DRS 3 Amend E. Printed copies of the amendments are also available. If you don't have them, address yourselves to the Secretariat, please. In discussing the amendments, I will first call the proposer of the amendment and then will call any opponent of the amendment. I will then ask the sponsor of the draft resolution, our rapporteur, Mr. Hajjiani, if he has not already spoken, for his opinion. Following that, I shall put the amendment to the vote. I ask speakers to strictly observe the time limit of 1 minute. We are also required to vote on every paragraph to which there are no amendments. We will start by taking paragraphs 1 to 9 together. 1 to 9 together. Does anyone want a separate vote on any of these paragraphs? No, so we will proceed in this manner. Thank you. Amendments 1 and 2 both relate to paragraph 10 and populism. I will therefore group the amendments together for discussion as allowed for under Rule 22(7) of the Rules of Procedure. Please note that if Amendment 1 is agreed to, Amendment 2 will be preempted and it will not be put to a vote. I call now Signore Augussori d'Italia di proponerci la proposta 1.
Grazie Presidente, cari amici e colleghi. Con questo emendamento chiediamo lo stralcio dell'intero paragrafo 10 che sarebbe probabilmente per gran parte della delegazione italiana preclusivo al sostegno alla risoluzione in toto. Il nostro auspicio è che l'intera risoluzione ricalchi lo stile linguistico inclusivo di tutte le componenti qui rappresentate e probabilmente sottorappresentate. Ricordo infatti, ad esempio, che nelle recenti elezioni per il rinnovo del Parlamento europeo i movimenti populisti e sovranisti hanno raccolto decine di milioni di consensi e che nel mio paese, l'Italia, questi sono superiori al 50%. Criminalizzare il populismo come fosse un virus alieno, in questo caso sì, spesso con falsi messaggi, sarebbe un errore e dovreste invece riflettere sulle ragioni che hanno portato a questa situazione. In primis le scelte politiche del recente passato relative, soprattutto nel mio Paese, alla gestione dei migranti economici, che sono cosa ben diversa da chi avrebbe legittimazione a vedersi riconosciuto il diritto d'asilo avendo un reale status di profugo. Thank you.
Grazie. I call Mr. Dobre from Romania to propose Amendment 2.
Thank you, Mrs. Chairman. I propose to replace at paragraph 10, political populism across the OSCE regime, often based on the demonization of minority, with the following: populism across the OSCE region, often based on the demonization of persons belonging to national minorities. First change is in order to adopt to the language used in the official documents, and second, as the human rights are by definition related to the persons and not to the communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against these amendments? What is this? Ukraine, please.
Уважаемая госпожа председатель, уважаемые коллеги, мы предлагаем пункт 10 оставить в той редакции, который предложен уважаемым автором, докладчиком. И мотивация здесь идет таким образом, что нередко государства, члены организации прибегают к политическому популизму и для решения собственных целей они нередко прибегают к демонизации национальных меньшинств и коренных народов, которые проживают на территории соответствующих государств. Этим особенно злоупотребляет Российская Федерация, которая очень часто в своей внутренней информационной политике она прибегает к навешиванию ярлыков против народов, проживающих на территории Российской Федерации. И особо она злоупотребляет этим на территории оккупированных украинских территорий. Собственно, в отношении крымских татар, коренного народа Крыма, в оккупированном украинском Крыму Россия прибегает к системным репрессиям с целью, чтобы вытеснить коренной народ с полуострова. И поэтому мы предлагаем оставить этот пункт, потому что государство часто использует навешивание ярлыков против народов как инструмент подавления их свобод.
Thank you. What is our rapporteur's opinion on these amendments?
Actually, thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, the issue of populism is the basic of my report and the resolution. So the growing populist trends across the OSCE region are very worrisome, and they are often with strong hate and divisive rhetoric targeting minorities groups, particularly migrants. And such negative behaviors, which trigger social unrest and violence, pose a significant threat to social cohesion, stability, and security. Therefore, I do not agree with this amendment. And for the second amendment from our chair, I accept the second amendment. So reject the first and accept the second.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 1 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 1 please raise their voting cards clearly high up, please?
4.
Will all those against Amendment 1 please raise their voting cards? Abstentions, please. Defeated. Amendment 1 is defeated. For the amendment 13, against the amendment 43, abstentions 4. I shall now proceed to a vote on amendment 2. Will those in favor of amendment 2 please raise voting cards? Will all those against please raise their voting cards? Abstentions, please. Adopted. Amendment 2 is adopted by 24 for, 17 against, 16 abstentions. We now move to discuss Amendment 3. Is Mr. Omanovic from Sweden here? Or who else from Sweden takes this amendment, please? Sweden. Sweden, does anyone wish to take the floor for Amendment 3 from Sweden, please? You are several to have signed from Sweden. Who wishes to take on this amendment from Sweden? What do we do? Please, you have the floor.
Dear Madam, this is an amendment written by Mr. Jasenko Manovic. Unfortunately, he hadn't the chance to be here this time with us, but I suggest that we vote for this amendment. I had my speech yesterday that we are worried about the development of the rights for the LGBTI persons also within our own OSCE region. And I think it's important that the PA, the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, truly supports this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 3? No. What is Mr. Hadjiani's opinion on the amendment?
I accept the amendment.
We now put Amendment 3 to the vote. All those in favor of Amendment 3, please raise your voting cards. Will all those against Amendment 3 please raise the voting cards? Abstentions? Amendment 3 is adopted by 47 yes, 6 no, 6 abstentions. We will now take paragraphs 11 to 15 together. Does anyone wish a separate vote on any of those paragraphs? No? So we can move in this way. And I put to debate Amendment 4. And I call Mr. Aydin from Turkey to propose Amendment 4.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would like to demand the deletion of paragraph 16 for mainly two basic reasons, as I mentioned yesterday. Firstly, this kind of irrelevant issue cannot contribute to the cooperation spirit of the organization. Secondly, this is totally a historical issue which can be discussed by experts and historians, as already notified in Astana General Assembly item 68. Instead, in order not to destroy the general reading of the report, if the rapporteur agrees, we would like to propose an oral amendment which reads, recalling paragraph 68 of the Astana Declaration in 2008, OSCPA General Assembly calls on OSCP member states to take into consideration this article particularly regarding the establishment of joint history commissions between participating states for controversial issues among the member states, and recognizes that the parliaments should not assume the role of judiciary in the absence of ruling competent international court. Thank you.
Thank you. So we heard Turkey is proposing here an oral amendment instead of the written amendment for deleting paragraph 16. According to our procedure, dear colleagues, if an oral amendment is proposed, in accordance with paragraph 10 of Rule 22 of our Rules of Procedure, first I will ask you whether there is any objection to the oral amendment being considered. If there is any one objection, the oral amendment cannot be considered and it then falls. If there is no objection, we will proceed to consider the amendment in the same way as other amendments. That is, we will hear from the proposer of the oral amendment one speaker against and then the opinion of the rapporteur. I see there is opposition, first from Armenia and other delegation. Yes, so Armenia first and then...
Point of order, madam.
Was it just North Macedonia? Malta. The rapporteur wishes to speak first.
I find that it is helpful to accept the need from the delegation of Turkey to have the oral amendment. There is a better possibility to hear all of you, also the other position. I mean, will be much more democratic.
Yeah. Excuse me, Mr. Rapporteur, but there is objection to the oral amendment, so this is a point of order that we are discussing, and I wish now to give the floor to Armenia.
Dear colleagues, Armenian delegation objects for oral amendment.
The amendment is objected. In other words, the oral amendment posed by Turkey falls. Does anyone want to speak to Amendment 4? Armenia, please.
Against, yeah. This is against, yeah? Dear colleagues,
against.
The objective of this paragraph is genocide remembrance, which is part of the OSCE commitments. The paragraph is not directed against any contemporary state. Moreover, many prominent representatives of Turkish society, scholars, human rights defenders and editors, such as Hrant Dink, Orhan Pamuk, Rajib Zarakolu, and others have contributed to Armenian genocide remembrance and education. There cannot be sustainable development without protection of human rights and remembrance of the lessons of the past. We call on Parliamentary Assembly to support this paragraph and join the efforts of international community to prevent occurrence of genocides and mass atrocities. Thank you. And we call to vote against this amendment.
Thank you. What is our rapporteur's opinion of the amendment?
So speaking out, educating about genocide is our imperative duty to humanity, and so that similar crimes may not be repeated in the future. As of April 2019, governments and parliaments of 31 countries, as well as 49 out of 50 in US states, have officially recognized the Armenian genocides, joining the consensus of historians and academic institutions of Holocaust and genocide studies. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now put Amendment 4 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 4 please raise voting cards high up, please, so we can see it? All those against Amendment 4, please raise voting cards. Abstentions, please. The Amendment 4 is defeated by 39 against, 11 for, by 12 abstentions. I call now Amendment 5. Instead of Mr. Cohen, Mr. Harris from the United States is motivating this amendment. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm introducing Amendment 5 for Mr. Cohen, who spoke about the issue of Roma yesterday. And this fits well between paragraph 16 and on the Armenian genocide and a subsequent paragraph regarding anti-Roma racism in the OSCE region. So it would be appropriate to add this new genocide remembrance paragraph, remembering that this upcoming August 2nd and 3rd marks the 75th anniversary of the destruction of the so-called Gypsy family camp at Auschwitz. At a time when rhetoric against Roma often echoes the past persecution of Roma, it's especially important that we remember this genocide and learn from its consequences, and I would move the amendment.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 5? I then ask Mr. Hadjiani to utter his opinion.
I agree fully with this amendment, which I also co-signed. We stay on the same line against the genocide and depend who is and when it was happened. Thank you.
I shall then put Amendment 5 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 5 please raise their voting cards? Will all those against Amendment 5 please raise their voting cards? Abstentions? Amendment 5 is adopted by 60 yes, 0 against, 1 abstention. Amendment 6, I call Ms. Moore from Canada to propose Amendment 6.
Merci. Je voudrais remercier le rapporteur pour son rapport et sa résolution qui visant à encourager le développement durable pour promouvoir la sécurité et examiner le rôle des parlementaires à cet égard. Le paragraphe 17 fait état des préoccupations concernant le fait que les Roms et les Sinti continuent d'être marginalisés dans l'espace de l'OSCE, notant que les femmes et les filles Roms et Sinti sont particulièrement vulnérables aux multiples formes de discrimination et de violence. Les peuples autochtones de l'OSCE sont aussi la cible de discrimination motivée par les préjugés et le racisme, qui se caractérisent par du harcèlement et de la violence. Au Canada, par exemple, le rapport publié récemment sur l'enquête nationale sur les femmes et les filles autochtones disparues et assassinées a révélé que les violations persistantes et délibérées des droits de la personne et des droits autochtones sont la cause profonde de la violence disproportionnée et documentée dont sont victimes les femmes, les filles et les personnes LGBTQ2S autochtones au Canada. La Déclaration des Nations unies sur les droits des peuples autochtones rappelle que les peuples autochtones ont le droit à la jouissance complète, collective et ou individuelle de la totalité des droits de la personne et des libertés fondamentales reconnues par la Charte de l'ONU, soit la Déclaration universelle des droits de l'homme et du droit international. Les Autochtones, à l'instar des Roms et des Sinti, sont libres et égaux à tous les autres et ont le droit de ne faire objet...
Madame Moore, s'il vous plaît. Merci. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 6? No? What is the rapporteur's opinion on Amendment 6?
I accept this amendment from Chair.
We then put Amendment 6 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 6 please raise their voting cards? You have to help me on this one. Will all those against Amendment 6 please raise their voting cards? Abstentions? Amendment 6 is adopted by 64, 1 against, 0 abstentions. As Amendment 6 was to replace paragraph 17, I shall take paragraph 17 as defeated, and we therefore do not vote on it. We will now vote on paragraph 18. Anyone against? We can then go on to Amendment 7. Paragraph 18 is agreed. Amendment Ireland, point of order.
Just to clarify, Amendment 17, paragraph 17, I don't believe we voted on defeating paragraph 17. We voted to amend it. I'm sorry, before we move to the next. Apologies.
The amendment number 6.
The amendment from Canada, Amendment 6,
yes,
which was adopted, replaces paragraph 17.
Okay.
Does that clarify? Okay,
yes,
we're fine. Thank you. We then move to Amendment 7. I call Ms. Fry from Canada to propose Amendment 7.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's pretty simple. I am proposing that after the words violations in Chechnya, we add specific language that says, including in particular against lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and intersex LGBTI individuals. I think that this is really important. I want to thank the rapporteur for putting in this particular paragraph, but I think it can be made better because we know that human rights are indivisible. We're all human beings. We are all deserving of rights. And what we do know is that there had been media reports and there had been civil society reports that said that in Chechnya there was particular targeting of LGBTQ individuals, and that we need to speak against that. Because of that information, Canada and 15 other OSCE states asked to invoke a rapporteur to visit the area. This was denied. And so one of the things that we found out then is that, especially in the case of somebody like Maxim Lyapunov, who was a Russian man who was tortured and beaten, and we know that extrajudicial arrests, etc., have been going on, specifically targeting this group. So I hope that you will accept this amendment. Thank you.
Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 7? What is the rapporteur's opinion?
I accept the amendment.
I shall then put Amendment 7 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 7 please raise their voting cards? Will all those against please raise their voting cards? Please raise them really up. We can hardly see it from here. Any abstentions? The back there. Amendment 7 is adopted by 54, 5 against, 1 abstention. We will now vote on paragraph 19 as amended. Anyone against? Those in favor of paragraph 19 as amended? Those in favor of paragraph 19 as amended? Abstentions? Paragraph 19 as amended is adopted by 38 yes, 1 no, 0 abstention. No, excuse me, 1 against, 1 abstention. We will now take paragraphs 20 and 21 together. Does anyone want a separate vote on those two paragraphs? So we will take paragraphs 20 and 21 together. And I put them to the vote. Is anyone against? So adopted. Paragraphs 20 and 21 are adopted. Amendment 8, I call Mr. Wicker from the United States to propose Amendment 8.
Thank you, Madam Chair and fellow members of the committee. In May of last year, Bill Browder was arrested in his hotel room as a guest in Spain. Bill Browder is a citizen of the United Kingdom and has been for some years the leading voice in exposing the murder of Sergei Magnitsky. He was arrested on a bogus diffusion issued improperly through Interpol, and this reflects an abuse of a legitimate law enforcement organization. We need to condemn this. We need to point out to the world that sometimes when a red notice is not allowed, there's a way around it by a diffusion, which can be done by an autocratic government. This happens to journalists. This happens to athletes. This can happen to citizens of your country, and I hope we'll make a statement that this needs to be condemned and needs to be rectified by a legitimate law enforcement agency. Thank you, Madam.
Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 8? Russian Federation, please.
Благодарю вас, господин председатель. Вот господин Викер всегда, и он, наверное, у него такая внутренняя злоба на Россию, скорее всего. Вот. А то, что было сделано силовыми правоохранительными органами, это все в рамках закона. И вот поправки пишут, в частности, Россия. Таким же образом можно написать, в частности, в США. Там такое происходит, что, извините, Российская Федерация вообще не понимает эту поправку. Спасибо.
Spasiba. What is Mr. Hadjiani's opinion of the amendment?
I accept the amendment.
I shall now put Amendment 8 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 8 please raise their voting cards? Will all those against Amendment 8 please raise their voting cards? Are there any abstentions? Amendment 8 is adopted by 52 for, 5 against, 6 abstentions. We will now vote on paragraph 22. Anyone against? It is adopted. We can move on to Amendment 9. I call Ms. Moore from Canada to propose Amendment 9.
Je félicite le rapporteur de s'inquiéter de la prévalence de la violence sexiste dans l'espace de l'OSCE. Outre que la violence sexiste est gravement sous-signalée, il faut noter que les taux extrêmement faibles de plaintes retenues et d'inculpations pour des crimes fondés sur le sexe, dont les agressions sexuelles. Au Canada, environ 5% des agressions sexuelles sont signalées à la police et environ 1 agression sur 10 signalée à la police se solde par une condamnation criminelle, selon une étude récente. Des rapports font ressortir des problèmes de même nature dans les autres pays de l'OSCE. La proposition d'amendement renforcera le libellé du paragraphe 17 sur la violence sexuelle. Les parlementaires de l'OSCE feront ainsi savoir qu'ils prennent la question de la violence au sérieux et qu'ils sont déterminés à mettre fin à la culture du silence et l'impunité des coupables, qui font de la violence sexiste l'une des violations des droits de la personne toujours les plus fréquentes dans l'espace de l'OSCE. Merci de votre appui.
Merci. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 9? What is our rapporteur's opinion?
I am in favor, Madam Chair.
I shall now put Amendment 9 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 9 please raise their voting cards? Will all those against please raise their voting cards? Any abstentions? Amendment 9 is adopted by 64 for, 1 against, 0 abstentions. As Amendment 9 was to replace paragraph 23, I take paragraph 23 as defeated, and we therefore do not need to vote on paragraph 23. Amendment 10, I call Ms. Fry from Canada to propose Amendment 10.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair. As my colleague from Canada just said, not only is violence against women rampant, it is also held together by this culture of silence. And we know that it's crimes against women and violence against women are underreported around the world. So I want to thank the rapporteur for making sure that he brought attention to this. But I would like to see this new paragraph that I'm proposing put together, because we don't only want to view women as victims. We have seen how young women today have led and shown leadership in moving forward to be meaningful agents of change. And so we want to make sure that we strengthen the idea that young women and women have a role to play in changing things, in moving forward, giving a broad range of perspectives and the ability to take matters into their own hands and therefore become empowered. So I think that shows the committee's commitment to that kind of activity. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 10? What is Mr. Hadjiani's opinion?
Of course, I agree, Madam Chair. The ads of Mrs. Fry is much better and complete the whole issue there.
Thank you. Will all those in favor of Amendment 10 please raise their voting cards? Will all those against Amendment 10 please raise voting cards? Any abstentions? Amendment 10 is adopted by 55 for, 0 against, 0 abstentions. We will now take paragraphs 24 to 26 together. Is anyone wishing a separate vote on those two paragraphs? Agreed to. We will then. Any objections? No. Paragraphs 24 to 26 are adopted. Amendment 11. I call Mr. Otterholt from the United States to propose this Amendment 11.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This amendment commends the OSCE's Office of Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, known as ODIHR, for assisting the OSCE participating states in their implementation of OSCE commitments. ODIHR legal reviews assess whether drafts and existing legislation complies with OSCE human dimension commitments and human rights standards. ODIHR legal reviews include models of best practices for the participating states and recommendations for improvement. The ODIHR takes an average of 2 to 3 months to prepare a legal review, although it can expedite in urgent situations. Another amendment to the operative section of this resolution will encourage states to seek review from ODIHR, and this preambular paragraph sets the stage for that amendment.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 11? What is our rapporteur's opinion?
I accept the amendment from Madam.
I shall then put Amendment 11 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 11 please raise their voting cards? Will all those against Amendment 11 please raise their voting cards? Are there any abstentions? Amendment 11 is adopted by 62 for, 2 against, 0 abstentions. We will now take paragraphs 27 to 29 together. Does anyone want a separate vote on paragraphs 27 to 29? This is not the case, so we will take paragraphs 27 to 29 together. Anyone against? Anyone against those paragraphs? Therefore, they are adopted. Amendment 12, I call Mr. Smith from the United States to propose Amendment 12.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. This amendment operationalizes the Adderholt Amendment just adopted. As you all know, ODIHR has a mandate to assist OSCE participating states implement OSCE commitments. Their legal review assesses whether or not draft or existing legislation complies with OSCE human rights dimension commitments and human rights standards. The legal reviews include models of best practices from other participating states and recommendations for improvement. However, ODIHR can only conduct a legal review upon request. Representatives of OSCE states who can request a legal review include governmental ministers, deputy ministers, heads of departments, parliamentary speakers, deputy speakers, head of committees, judicial self-governing bodies and courts, national human rights institutions, ombudsman institutions, and field operations. I urge support of the amendment.
Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 12? No. What is Mr. Hadjiani's opinion?
I accept the amendment.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 12 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 12 please raise their voting cards? Will all those against Amendment 12 please raise their voting cards? Abstentions? Amendment 12 is adopted by 61 for, 2 against, 0 abstentions. We will now take paragraphs 30 to 32 together. Does anyone want a separate vote on any of these paragraphs? Nobody? So we will take paragraphs 30 to 32 together. Anyone against? Therefore, paragraphs 30 to 32 are adopted. Amendments 13 to 15 relate to paragraph 33 and human rights in conflicts. I will therefore group the amendments together for discussion as allowed for under Rule 22(7) of the Rules of Procedure. Please note that if Amendment 13 is agreed to, Amendments 14 and 15 will be preempted and will not be put to a vote. If Amendment 14 is agreed to, Amendment 15 will be preempted and will not be put to a vote. Moving on to Amendment 13, I call Mr. Smith from the United States to propose Amendment 13.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This amendment is needed because OSCE states have made OSCE commitments on human rights and fundamental freedoms, not just human rights. In addition, international humanitarian law, such as the Geneva Conventions, governs occupations and armed conflicts. Under international humanitarian law, an occupying power and its armed groups that are under its control are prohibited from acquiring sovereignty over the territory, displacing civilians unless there is a military imperative, or it is to protect those civilians, violating laws enforced in the occupied territory, transferring population from and within the occupied territory, transferring civilian populations of the occupying power, collective punishment, taking hostages, confiscating private property, and violating religious freedom, among other prohibitions. They are also obligated to respect cultural property, ensuring sufficient hygiene, public health, food, and medical care, again, among other obligations. I urge support for the amendment.
I call Ms. Fry from Canada to propose Amendment 14.
Madam Chair, Amendment 14 is actually trying to insert 5 words after humanitarian challenges. And the words are, and conduct gender needs assessments of people in conflict areas. We know that it's very well documented that actually women are specifically vulnerable in conflict zones in terms of safe places to live, in terms of rape as a strategy of war. And so I think it's really important that when we are looking at the challenges in this area, that we conduct gender needs assessment to find out, do these people, as we're finding solutions, do we have solutions that will address the vulnerability of women in these areas? Thank you.
I call Ms. Muradova from Azerbaijan to propose Amendment 15.
Спасибо, уважаемый председатель. Несомненно, обеспечение защиты прав человека в зонах конфликтов является одной из важных задач в свете набора обязательств ОБСЕ по беженцам и внутренне перемещенным лицам. Я благодарна докладчику за включение вопроса прав человека и гуманитарной проблемы этой уязвимой группы в проект резолюции. Но параграф 33, я думаю, должен четче отображать всеобъемлющий подход к правам человека и гуманитарным проблемам всех лиц, пострадавших от конфликта и оккупации территорий. Мы не должны забывать, что никакое право не может быть осуществлено за счет нарушения прав других. Внутренне перемещенные лица, которые жили в зоне конфликта, имеют равные права с теми, кто все еще проживает там. Поэтому мы предлагаем заменить выражение в параграфе 33 «люди в районах конфликтов и на оккупированных территориях» на «люди, затрагиваемые конфликтами и оккупацией территорий», с целью отразить права человека людей, живущих ныне в зоне конфликта, и людей, изгнанных из этих зон. Прошу поддержать. Спасибо.
Does anyone wish to speak against amendments 13, 14, 15? What is our rapporteur's opinion, please?
With Amendment 1.3, I agree, Madam Chair. For the Amendment 1.4 and 1.5, I will suggest to combine this because we have to have also the conflict areas. If we don't put it in, so it means that we put it away, the conflict areas, and we will stay only by conflict affected areas, generally.
Mr. Rapporteur, maybe you will need to be a bit more clear on this, but in the meantime, I will pass the floor to our committee officer for some clarification on the procedure.
I need to talk to the rapporteur.
Okay, so that he doesn't wish to take the floor. I will explain the following. With regard to so that the matter for you should be clear before we start the voting procedure. If Amendment 13 is adopted, as Amendment 13 was to replace paragraph 33, Amendments 14 and 15 will be preempted. Please, Mr. Rapporteur.
Amendment 30, I will support it. Okay, as it is. Amendment 14, it is an oral amendment from my side, or I don't know, also from the other, to make a compromise and to include all the three areas: conflict areas, conflict-affected areas, and occupied areas, to be all together, not just conflict-affected areas.
Thank you for this clarification and oral amendment, Mr. Rapporteur. So we first vote on Amendment 13. All those in favor of Amendment 13, please raise their voting cards. means. Will all those against Amendment 13 please raise voting cards? Abstentions? Amendment 13 is adopted by 56 for, 0 against, 4 abstentions. Therefore, amendments 14 and 15 are preempted and we do not have to discuss oral amendment.
Do we?
Yeah.
The text has been replaced, basically.
We then move to the vote on Amendment 15. Will all those in favor? No. 15 is preempted. Sorry. 15 is also preempted. I can go a bit faster. Excuse me. I have to speed up. Is there a point of order? Yes. Azerbaijan, Mrs. Muradova, please.
Уважаемый председатель, мы хотели бы, чтобы нашу поправку отдельно поставили на голосование, потому что там разные толкования.
Mrs. Mordavo, you are wishing a separate vote on Amendment 15 as a point of order. I take it as a point of order. Is anyone objecting to this point of order to have a separate vote on Amendment 15? No. So let's...
Madam Chair, Roger Wicker from
United States, Mr. Wicker, please.
I do think it was made abundantly clear on 3 occasions by the chair that the adoption of Amendment 13 would preempt Amendment 14 and 15. I would also point out to the chair, and I don't want to get into the rapporteur's mind, but I think he noticed that the amendment by Mr. Smith, which has been adopted, addresses conflicts as has been requested. It also addresses conflict areas and occupied territories as seemed to be the consensus of the committee. So I would suggest that the chair be sustained, and I would hope that the chair would stay with her initial ruling there.
Luxembourg, for a point of order, please. Oh, I'm sorry. The sign, your sign is behind the camera. I thought Luxembourg was bigger than you are. Excuse this, I apologize. Please, Netherlands.
Thank you very much. I don't think it's a question of being bigger or smaller, but we're neighbors of each other, and we're very happy to sit next to each other. Just to clarify also, for me, the Amendment 14, as there is the addition of the gender needs, and I just want to clarify also with my Canadian colleagues, for me it's not clear whether this part is now added to the new paragraph.
I can repeat what I said at the beginning when we entered into the discussion of amendments 13 to 15. It is according to the procedure that I made it clear that in case of adoption of Amendment 13. Both Amendments 14 and 15 would be preempted. So,
Can I suggest an alternative?
Madam Chair,
please.
point of order, please, Canada.
Canada, please.
Madam Chair, I agree with the new chapter 33, but paragraph 33. But I think it leaves out the important piece. It doesn't address the issue of gender needs, and I think that it could be rolled into paragraph 33, the new paragraph 33 that we have accepted. If you just ignore 14, you have totally ignored the issue of gender, which is not included in the new paragraph 33.
So I, having heard your points of order, I suggest that we accept your oral points of order and that we accept the wordings in Amendment 14 and 15 to be a part of paragraph 33. Mr. Rapporteur, please.
Madam Chair, I will come again to Amendment 1.4 because I had an old version of the table. So for Amendment 1.4, I agree and I support fully without any change of terms, okay? And I think I suggest to go for voting only for the Amendment 1.4.
Rapporteur is suggesting to have a specific vote on Amendment 14.
Yeah.
Anybody opposed? Let's vote on Amendment 14. All those in favor of Amendment 14, please raise voting cards. And what do we do on 50? I have to do it accordingly? I have to do it accordingly? Yeah, we will do it. Yeah, it's better. It's better.
Perfect.
All those against Amendment 14, please raise your voting cards. Abstentions? Amendment 14 is adopted by 43 for, 2 against, 4 abstentions. What we can vote on? Consequently, Mr. Rapporteur, I suggest to vote specifically also on Amendment 15. Do you agree?
So on Amendment 15, it was my oral amendment just to combine the two the suggestion and then what was written in my report. Actually, on the human rights and humanitarian challenges of people in conflict areas and occupied territories and conflict-affected areas. This is my amendment, oral amendment.
Thank you. So
Madam
you
Chair.
all heard the oral proposal of the rapporteur. Is this opposed to?
Madam Chair.
If it's opposed, it will
Madam Chair.
fall. Please, I pass the floor. Azerbaijan has asked for the floor first. Azerbaijan has the floor, and then United States.
Спасибо, уважаемый председатель. Я тоже согласна со своей коллегой Фрай и поддерживаю поправку 33. И прошу, чтобы наша поправка тоже нашла свое отражение в новом параграфе, за который мы только что проголосовали. И я хочу узнать, будет это сделано или нет.
Thank you. I now pass the floor to Mr. Vicker, United States, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would simply point out, as a matter of accommodating the rapporteur, that the precise language which he advocated just a moment ago is already contained in Amendment 13, which has been adopted. I do believe, word for word, sir, those words are in there and stand to be corrected if I'm mistaken. I think we're all in agreement as to what it should say, but I just don't know that we should say it twice, precisely as we already have it.
Thank you all for helping to clarify. My understanding is that also the suggestion by the rapporteur is to take up from Amendment 15 the formulation people affected by conflicts, and to replace in the Amendment 13 the expression people in conflict areas.
Okay.
Mrs. Muradova agrees.
Okay.
Is anybody opposed to this? Armenia, please.
Distinguished Chairwoman, dear colleagues, I am not opposing to this formulation, but the situation, I believe I am not the only person in this hall that has issues with clarification of the text, and it is my belief that author of the resolution only a few minutes ago had completely different wording rather than what was proposed recently by the chairwoman. We need to clarify before understanding what we are voting for. And that's the only way we can move forward.
Madam Chair, point of order.
Thank you all. I will pass the floor to Andreas Baker for some clarification, and then we will start proceeding to the vote. I would like to settle this before this morning still.
Thank you. We understand that there is effectively, it's an oral amendment to change what has already been agreed in Amendment 13. The language there is focus attention on the human rights, fundamental freedoms, and humanitarian challenges. It has already been agreed to put in and conduct gender needs assessments at that point, at which point the next oral amendment would be of people affected by conflicts and occupation of territories. So it would be a slight oral amendment to the previously agreed Amendment 13. Instead of people in conflict areas and occupied territories, it would be of people affected by conflicts and occupation of territories.
Yes. So we have to find out, according to the procedure, if this formulation, as I said, as rapporteur agreed, as Andreas Baker now also read out to you, if this oral proposal is agreed or opposed. If it is opposed, it then will fall.
Madam Chairwoman.
Ukraine,
Yes,
please.
yes,
Ukraine, please.
Two positions, one point of order. We oppose, because we think that the term of occupied territories must be left in the paragraph. And the second question, I think that we have a huge misunderstanding here now, because we don't see the final version of the paragraph because of this misconclusion and fuss. Maybe somebody from or Madam Chair or the rapporteur can present us the final version of the paragraph if we combine all the three amendments. But we think that the term that was proposed in the American Amendment 13 and in amendment of Mrs. Muradova must be left in the paragraph. It's principal thing to conclude that IOC area has territories that are occupied by the members of the OSCE, unfortunately. Thank you.
The oral amendment moved by rapporteur, read out by Chief Executive Officer, was opposed by Armenia. So, no,
There is
by
a misunderstanding.
Ukraine. Armenia, please, you have the floor.
Let's clarify. The rapporteur said that he is in favor of combining all language about the conflict. So it is in conflict areas and affected by conflict. We are for an inclusive language. So if we are adding conflict-affected areas to the formulation in conflict areas, that's perfectly fine, but not replacing. So we should have this inclusive language where it's in conflict areas and affected by conflict. So whoever resides there now and whoever is affected by removal or being near the conflict zones. Thank you. Bye.
I take the following suggestions up now. Would anyone oppose the formulation to replace in Amendment 13, people in conflict areas and people affected by conflicts?
No, we don't.
Is anybody opposing this? It seems to me to be a good combination, really, to get out of our discussion. Ukraine, you have the floor.
Yes. Thank you again, Madam Chair. Maybe I don't understand, the process that we are seeing completely, but we adopted the Amendment 13 of Mr. Smith when, and he states, and it was adopted by this Assembly now, people in conflict areas and occupied territories. Now, when we have this discussion inside, the occupied territories and this formulation that was made by the Amendment 13 are completely lost. Do we have, conflict zones, conflict areas, and occupied territories, please. We adopted this formulation with American Amendment, occupied territories. I don't understand what's going on here now, frankly speaking.
Madam Chair?
Madam Chair,
Chair?
a point of... Madam Chair, point of order, please. Canada, point of order.
Canada, please.
Madam Chair, I think, here's the thing. I think we are all in agreement with the language from 13, the language from 14, and the language from 15. Can we move on debating this particular report, move on to other amendments, have someone write out exactly what we mean? You can read it, we can come back and vote on it.
I agree. Thank you. Canada, I suggest we adjourn the
Madam Chair?
discussion. Please, we have to move on. We adjourn this discussion and we will come back at the beginning of this afternoon's meeting
Madam Chair, if I could
with
just
a
make a brief
formulation
announcement.
that has been drafted according all discussions. Please, United States, you have
Thank you
the
very much,
floor.
Madam Chair. Just take 30 seconds. I would invite everyone here. We have a very, very important man, Kenneth Morris, the great-great-grandson of a former slave. In room number 8, who will be talking about human trafficking and the need for education. We have a supplemental coming up later on this afternoon in this committee, but I invite you to go to room number 8 for this important lunch/meeting. There's much to be learned. We do not, in our countries, have enough education for our young people, and as a result, many are ensnared in modern-day slavery.
Thank you. The meeting is adjourned. We will start again this afternoon, 16:30 in this conference hall. Bon appétit. Thank you for the good discussions.